Well, no surprises here today. It's like clockwork. I mean, I would be shocked if something like this did not happen. This is stock standard blobcraft uh, on display in its ugliest form. The same thing was done to Imran Khan. The same thing was done to the PIS party in Poland, and now it's being done in Romania. If folks remember, in Pakistan, Imran Khan, the popular head of state there, was ousted in a U.S. State Department backed coup where leaked cables showed the that carrots and sticks were given to the parliamentarians, the members of the Pakistani intelligence and military corps, to get him removed in a no confidence vote, despite being the most popular person in the country and the elected head of state. They then canceled and postponed elections because they were afraid that Imran Khan would simply win the next election after being removed. And so, in order to stop that, so that they could have elections again, they simply arrested him on something like 200 charges. He is currently in prison still today. They did the same thing we saw, and I talked about this on Joe Rogan and many other places. The National Endowment for Democracy hatched a plan after a razor close Polish election to essentially try to pressure Donald Tusk's government to arrest all of the major political figures around the PIS party to, quote, stamp out populism and ensure that they can't win again in the next election. That is an explicit plot from the U.S. government, and make no doubt about it. Ned gets 100% of its funds from the U.S. government and directly from the State Department. It is accountable to the State Department. We saw the same thing here in Romania, which is that if they didn't arrest him, they could nullify round one, they could nullify round two. The guy is going to win unless you take him out. We call this democratic stability when we arrest someone and then achieve a stable state because there's no way the opposition can win.
So the through line here for all of this, of course, is these are the populist nationalist candidates that we're talking about. It's every time. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, Imran Khan and the Poles and the Romanians all have the same political ideology when it comes to their philosophy in politics or where they're coming from. But what do they stand against? That's what you have to look at. These are people who stand for the sovereignty of their country against this global intranational statecraft. And so when it comes to Imran Khan, well, what does he stand? He's right there in Pakistan. I mean, we could talk about all of the pipelines and the Chinese trying to get across and build their pipelines in their economic corridors with the Belt and Road Initiative across Pakistan to connect them with Iran. Then when you go to Romania and when you go to Poland, of course, these are key corridors. Poland having the LNG platform where the United States can bring LNG through the Baltic into Northern Europe. And then Romania, my goodness, when you talk about the geography, I know we have a map of Romania that we were chatting about and we put up in the last segment there. That's what people need to understand. Romania is the eastern flank of NATO. People say Poland is, but Romania is actually even further east. And what does Romania offer that Poland does not to NATO? They have the direct port Constantana on the Black Sea. Benz, why is that port of Constantana so important to NATO?
Well, NATO is building the largest NATO base in all of Europe right there on the Black Sea coast, pointing straight out at Crimea. As we speak, drones and military fighter jets are being moved from the Ramstein Air Force Base into that exact NATO air base. It is going to be the #1 source of force projection for NATO against Russia for the duration of this war and frankly for the decades following. Romania does not want a big fat kick me sign from Russia on its back. And so what Georgescu is guilty of is the same thing that Imran Khan and the PIS party were. It's what the State Department cables refer to as taking a, quote, aggressively neutral position. Just before Imran Khan was ousted, he had said, we want to be friends with everyone. We don't hate the United States, but we don't hate Russia. Same thing with how the Polish PIS party was shifting towards the end of their tenure. They wanted good relations with all, and it's the same thing with Georgescu has been saying. He hasn't been talking ill of the West very much. It's been mostly that he just didn't want to have Romania be the source of force projection for killing Russians. And Romania plays a very important role for several reasons. It is also one of the primary modes of transport of weapons from Pakistan and from other shipment by sea before it gets to Ukraine, because it is a NATO country. And so Russia cannot mess with goods bound for Romania the same way they could if it was going directly to Ukraine. And so there is this pipeline of transshipment of munitions into Romania. Georgescu has indicated that he wants to stop that as well. He doesn't want Romanian-bound weapons killing Russians, and he doesn't want the NATO base there. And so NATO can no longer go around assassinating people or doing 1999 style 78 straight days of bombing campaigns on the parliament in Romania simply because they voted for someone in an election. They need another mechanism to make sure their plans still happen. And that mechanism is taking over the court system in Romania. And we saw USAID funds juicing the whole Romanian court system. We see USAID programs for rule of law and anti-corruption. And all that means is regime change, just because you can't assassinate them formally. The only way you can do it is judicially.
Well, and of course, this is something that in the past, the Romanians, they say it's the post-communist government, but in many ways, the post-communist order, which was set up particularly in the footprint of these post-communist nations in the eastern part of Europe, really do kind of maintain a lot of the same character as their communist predecessors. The only difference being, rather than being controlled by Moscow, they're controlled by globalists out of Brussels, but they're backed by, in many cases, certainly in Romania and Hungary, by the George Soros network, the Open Society network. And this is something I was actually having a discussion about this with Carrie Lake when she's now going to be taking over the Voice of America. But you have the same issue where so many of the people that get hired at these places, especially the Voice of America offices, they're actually locals. They say, oh, there's no way Americans can do these jobs. They'll hire locals who've been trained in Soros universities, who have come up through the Soros ranks, have been through Soros government entities or these NGOs, many times backed by USAID funding. This has been the playbook. This has been the playground of the eastern flank of NATO for some time. Why? And I think you hit the nail on the head, because they're totally focused on war with Russia. That's what they've been planning for. That's why they're building this. That's why all these things matter so much to them. And if you look at all of their moves from an anti-Russia standpoint, including this right now, by the way, this is what it's all about.
Yeah, you can imagine from NATO's perspective, it's the same things that Big New Brzezinski said about funding the Mujahideen. That, yeah, we funded these Islamo-fascist terrorist groups, but what is a bunch of hillside guerrillas in they're a hill of beans in the scale of the history of winning the Cold War? And that is the way NATO sees the fate of the sovereignty of Romania. Yeah, we arrested the guy who would have won the election, but if we didn't do that, we wouldn't get our NATO base, we wouldn't get our weapons in Ukraine, and we'd lose the entire 21st century great plan to seize Eurasia from Russia. And so they feel like they have to do this. And the American people now have a choice about whether or not we need to go along with this, given that we provide over half of all NATO funding.
Well, and good thing, by the way, that there was never any blowback from funding the Mujahideen. I mean, I can't certainly think of anything that's anything negative that's come of that, right?
Nah, can't think of anything. Nothing coming up.
No, worked out great. I mean, we just won the war. The Middle East is perfectly safe. Everything's great. I mean, it's definitely not like they turned into like the Taliban and the and Osama bin Laden's Al Qaeda that came back ISIS, to the United States. ISIS, which then morphed into ISIS.
Now Romania is free, Jack.
Totally
think of that. We won the Cold War. Now Romania is a totally free and sovereign country.
Hey, I'm just gonna pop Rambo 3 onto my Plex server later tonight and just watch and think about how great the Mujahideen is. No, look, this is what always happens. This is like the funding of and by the way, for folks who haven't seen it, and I just Benz, I just got back from Ukraine last week. And now what are we seeing as the Ukraine peace talks come forward is we're seeing more and more radicalization from these Azov types. We are seeing them saying, oh, you sold us out. You and the Americans, particularly in the West, in general, you sold us out, which, by the way, we did warn you that if you would listen to Human Events Daily or the War Room or any of us guys on the right, we said over and over that this will not end well for you guys. But Ben's, all of this is happening as Trump is pressing the brakes on Ukraine, isn't it?
Well, that's another thing they're afraid of, which is that Romania would be an allied state for Trump as well. And it would give Trump one more bargaining chip against the EU and against London in terms of the alliance structure within NATO and the alliance structure internationally for negotiating peace and for ending war with Russia, which basically destroys all the, great laid plans of perfidious Albion and our shadow diplomacy network here in the U.S.